Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name's Ardil.
And my name's JP, the one and only.
This is the Skoda Superb. It has a load of gear already in it and incredible quality equipment inside the car. However, it has a rather big problem. This vehicle has come all the way from Ireland to ourselves here at Cambridge Car Audio to have basically this whole system ripped apart and started afresh and get it sounding right. But first of all, let's have a listen to it to see how it sounds and then see what we can do and see if we can find any issues with the stock system just by looking at it.
I've been searching for my own destiny. I raise my gun to the sky and scream out loud. This is my life, this is my hope, this is what I stand for. Now is the time to let it all. We are the young ones that fight for survival. We will watch like an eye on fire. We are the young ones that fight.
That is honestly really disappointing. And for me, sat in the car, staging is all over the place. Like I can't really tell where on earth the sound is coming from. Especially with a mid and a tweeter on top of a dashboard. Like normally staging is incredible. However, there's already so many flaws in the system with lack of mid bass that you're getting from those doors.
It just sounds very hollow. I'm almost reaching for the sound. I can't quite actually get it, and I just can't help but look at all the A-pillars. They're just putting me off most of the time. I'm staring at them.
I think these A-pillars could do with a lot of work. They aren't quite angled correctly, they're just falling to bits, and they're not positioned correctly either. The A-pillars are literally hanging off. Having things like this for a customer means they're going to look into things even further and find more issues. One thing that the customer showed me was when he picked up the car, there was no grills on the Hertz Miller Legend 3-inch mid-ranges. And you can tell why. So the customer has actually put them on himself after. And the reason why they weren't fitted was because the hole is not round. So obviously the grill is round and the actual A-pillar has been built. It's not round. I think now one really important thing is actually to go through the boot area where we can see some of the other products that are in the car, because this client really did go to town on the spec. Hertz Miller Legend front end, order some botched amplification, and also a custom sub box with a Hertz Legend sub. So what other issues are we going to find? This box, when driving, when moving or playing, basically there's movement in this box. So you can see...
Especially when that's thumping and that's going hard.
Yeah, so as that's moving, it's literally shaking this whole panel, and this box pretty much can come out. It's literally not secure at all. One other thing that we found was the carpet wasn't actually upholstered properly to the new floor that was made, and you can see why. I mean, underneath when you remove the floor, it's about that finishing touch. You can see the glue overspray, it's not satin blacked even, it's not even got any carpet on the other side, and then it reveals the amplification mess. The install just looks horrific. I mean, that just looks incredibly untidy. Everything is an afterthought. Like there's not one thing in this system that looks like it was thought about.
We're always planning every single cable route, every single mounting location whenever we're thinking about it. And this just looks like they've not created enough space for the amps to sit properly, so they've just gone wonky. Or they've had a thought of let's make it look cool and have them on the wonk, but then not actually designed any of the cables to go in those locations.
It's about highlighting to you guys at home about the difference between this level and how it should be done. And don't get me wrong, guys, this is actually better than a lot of the installs we see. It's now time for JP to get this one fixed up and basically redo this install. In essence, you're going to be taking it out and putting it back in properly.
Everything's coming out.
Everything's going to come out. We're going to be adding more soundproofing to the vehicle because soundproofing is a foundation layer of a good sound system. We're going to be soundproofing it properly, and well, we're in store to see what else we find in it. Bear in mind, guys, that this is the customer facing bit. This is what a customer can see. Imagine what we're going to find behind the
Oh
scenes.
God, yeah.
So without further ado, guys, let's jump in to today's video.
So, to start the project, we need to work on an external inspection of the car. We're looking at paintwork, any damages that are there before we start, making sure that we're not causing anything, so that when we give it back to the customer, we know that there's no damages caused in the workshop, we can hand it back safely. We're then also looking at internally, we're looking at any panels that we're going to be taking off, and with this one, we're going to be stripping the entire car. So we've got to start with doors, door cards, any of the seats, anything like that. We've got to make sure they're all protected and they're all safe before we can start. Then we're going to be moving on to actually the sound of the car, checking the tuning on the actual head unit, making sure that's all level and flat so to start with, make sure there's nothing going on in there that we need to worry about, and then we can move on to actually visual stuff for things like the A-pillars, see what we're dealing with the rest of the system. So a basic checklist just to get started, bit of diagnostics to just make sure everything is good on the car so that we have a base level to start with. But yeah, let's get to it. Right, so as you can see, we've done a lot of stripping of the back here as well now. We've done some of the doors and the A-pillars just to see what's going on behind there, but we'll move on to that in a bit. First, we're going to look at the subwoofer and this flooring area, because they're all held a little bit weird in place. It's not really held in place by anything except these screws. I've been finding these in weird places all over the car. I've had two in the bottom here with a spacer, which is holding the bottom of the subwoofer to this flooring. I've got one over here and one going diagonally into the top of here. That is it. There is nothing actually holding the subwoofer to the actual frame of the car. It's just a flimsy paneling and a dodgy floor that really isn't held in well. So obviously this causes the sub to just rattle in place. As you also noticed, as I was pulling the subwoofer out, that also had just simply self-tap wood screws drilled straight into the wood. Obviously this gives way with time. The wood is only an MDF or potentially MDF, and this slowly degrades and the threads just pull out. We will be, when we're remounting this, mounting our subwoofer with bolts into threaded inserts, which will be glued and mounted into the wood. This will hold and give a much better seal for that subwoofer. We will also be adding some bolting and potentially changing this subwoofer enclosure, seeing what we find when we actually get it out. Same with the floor, we're going to have to bolt this down properly and sort all that wiring out. Speaking of wiring as well, we'll move on to another place in the car. So on the side here, where we pulled out the seats and we started pulling out this side pieces, before I took this seat belt out to get this panel out properly, I noticed that actually it was earthed on the seat belt bolt. So they've not actually found a proper earth point, they've just gone onto a random bolt in the car. Yes, this works, but it's potentially going to create resistance because that is going through the paint of the seatbelt buckle, the paint of the car, and only transferring through the bolt. It's not going to create an amazing earth point. So we're going to have to find a different earth point for these. I'm also looking at pieces like this. We've got power wires hanging out all over the place. We've got the actual controller. This is the wiring for the controller, just going up this pillar and going straight to the front through the roof lining. So we're going to have to pull that out and find out where that goes. It all obviously reaches back to here. As you can see when I pull, it's all just loosely put in, no cable ties, no nothing. It's just slung in. There is nothing holding any of this down. So we're going to have to potentially rip all this out. We might be able to reuse some of it, but we'll continue stripping this out and see where we go from there. Now that we've got this all off, as you can see, there's no sound deadening back here where the actual mount for the amplifiers and everything was. And behind the subwoofer, there's even only two sheets to the subwoofer that wasn't even tied down. And one of those sheets is actually on foam, which makes no difference whatsoever. So it's just taking those foam bits out, putting it on the panels, completely covering the panels, and then reattaching those foam pieces that makes that difference. Just takes a bit longer time, but adds the extra quality. And some of this may never be seen again, but it makes all the difference to us. So we'll get this sort of finished back here, get this all tidied up, move on to the front, get the rest of the car stripped out, and then we can look at sound deadening and seeing what the hell going on in the front end. So we've now pulled the amplifier system outside of the car. Looking at their actual install though, very high quality. It's using high level gear and high level sort of techniques that need a lot of attention. Like they had optical input and a low level input coming straight from the optical conversion kit at the front of the car. This gives a high level and very clean input into the amplifier, and also a low level as a backup just in case. It's just poorly laid out, and none of the wiring throughout the entire car was cable tied down at all. I literally grabbed one end, pulled it all through, it's all out. We'll also remake this a bit bigger, bring this a bit further forwards, gives us more room for our wiring and everything. Also gives us the extra room for our 4-channel amplifier that we're going to be adding in for our rear speakers. Speaking of the rear speakers though, we can move on to the actual speakers that the car has in it. We have the A-pillars that were in the car. These are not bad. They're very sturdy, very solid. However, the amount of filler that has made these so sturdy and solid has also added the weight. We can make a lighter weight version. We can reuse all of these speakers. They're all good. However, the only thing that annoyed me was they were wired straight into the car. There was no connections, nothing whatsoever. I couldn't unplug them, so I've had to cut them out of the vehicle. These tweeters were also not held in whatsoever. They just fall out, which obviously isn't going to transfer the sound throughout the car very well, and the customer has had them fall out on him. So all in all, good idea, just not finished well. Again, behind the scenes stuff that you can't see makes these what they are. On to the doors though. In the doors we had these, obviously, as you saw before, with the MDF adaptation grills and the foam around the outside. Good technique. However, again, just rough cutting around the top, poor finish, and the MDF would have given way with time and has almost glued itself to the door with a lack of letting the paint dry and things like that. We're going to be copying their design because it is actually very good. We've 3D printed these adapters, got our logo on the top to show that we've done them, and these will bolt straight through from the speaker into the door. Same sort of idea, just sturdier, more solid, will last for a lot longer, and we've also added in a small plug hole for our XT60 connectors so that these are removable from the car if needed. We're going to also reuse the same sort of idea with the foam. We have these foam rings which look very similar to the ones that they've used. These will nicely go on top of these speakers, very similar to how they've done. Stick straight on top, and they'll keep the air movement from the speakers going straight out through the actual door cards. This will move the air outwards instead of having it bounce around in the back of the doors. It also then gives us these spare for the rears. We've got a ring that we can now put on the rear speakers, which are the 6.5 Hertz Melee Pros. This also comes with the tweeters. We'll be mounting them in the stock locations, as the rear doors do have those woofers and tweeters already. The front doors already have these foam pads in them. We will take them out, re-stick them down after we've finished sorting out their sound deadening and everything. And these spare ones we can now shove behind the rear doors speakers. So again, increasing the quality of those and increasing the entire quality of the sound system. It's all the correct stuff that they've got in the car. It's just not quite finished correctly. But with this, we've got a rough guesstimate of what we're doing with our speakers. We can do our A-pillars at some point, get that sorted, but first we need to sort out what soundproofing they've got in the car. We need to look at that, move on, see what they've got, fix that, and add our own to sort of round out the system and make the system what it can be. So we've completed the sound deadening for the doors, and I just wanted to talk to you through what we've actually done to them, because we've tried to reuse what was already in there, but we've also added to it as well. So on the front doors, we had a fully foamed door card. It was a good idea, but the foam isn't going to do all of what it needs to do. It's only going to stop those sound waves moving around in the door card, which aren't necessarily a problem, because with the foam around the speaker, we're forcing most of the sound waves out through the door card anyway. We're not actually going to have anything moving around in here. When it actually gets into the car, we've got all of those soft surfaces that it's going to bounce off of, and it's going to dull that sort of reverb noise. So we don't need that necessarily. However, I've reused it and kept it, so because it is good to have anyway. It's going to add and it's going to make a difference anyway. So I peeled that off, and underneath where we had all the solid surfaces, I've added some sound deadening to it. And then on the rear door cards, we didn't have anything at all. So as you can see, it's got this large cardboard sort of fabric area again. We don't need to touch that with anything, but I've added these large areas with the sound deadening. Nice, large, flat, looks pretty, looks nice, and is going to do the job. It's going to stop all these little lights and everything from vibrating. I've added a small bit around the back of the handle just to try and deaden that area a little bit as well, but not actually shoved anything on the actual components. In the boot, we have this very large and empty area. On the sides here, we have very solid supports. This is obviously from on the subframe of the vehicle, is going to make these bits very solid. So they're not going to move much and they're not going to resonate. However, in the middle here, there is a lot of thin and unsupported metal. This large space is just going to vibrate, and you can see that from factory they're already attempting to sound deaden it because they know that this will vibrate. So I'm going to completely fill this area, as well as a large flat piece over there which will be under the amplifiers and everything. That will resonate, of course, and we'll get that all sound deadened, and then with the amplifiers also bolted down, with the actual plate bolted down, that'll stop any of that from moving as well. And then moving on to the actual subwoofer area, they had previously put one sheet here, only 2mm thick, so the lesser stuff still does the job, but does a bit less. And then they'd also put it on top of this sort of padding as well, which is soundproofing from factory. However, it does nothing for sound deadening. The sound deadening was just sat on top of that foam, flopping about, not actually transferring into the actual metal and stopping that panel from vibrating. So we're going to be removing that, putting our sound deadening in, and then putting the soundproofing foam sort of stuff back on top with a bit of glue. So with the boot sound deadening done and it all sort of to the final sort of size that we're going to be working with, I got a bit busy and a bit bored and forgot to grab the videographers and started looking at the subwoofer. And as you can see, I've already put the panel back in, and we've moved on to sort of the next level, because we were going to try and reuse the original one. It's not a bad build, and it's a little bit ugly from behind, but that's not the end of the world. But from the front, it actually had a really nice shape and a really good finish. It just needed this central piece widening out a bit so that the grille would fit a bit better, and potentially just recarpeting. However, just to double check, we're doing a quick test to see what the volume of the actual sub box is and to see if it has any leaks and stuff. This specific subwoofer needs 25 litres or 23 at a minimum to be performing correctly, because this volume allows the subwoofer to create the correct frequencies on the other end. It just gives a cleaner sound. We have filled this with water so far, and as you can see down the bottom, we are already leaking a lot. We've got places like the actual wire coming out that is not sealed correctly, so around the wire it is leaking water, and around joints in the MDF there's a lot of water coming out as well. The volume as well is only 18 litres on this box, which is just not enough whatsoever. We're going to be suffocating this subwoofer with that amount of volume. With these water leaks, this obviously means that air is going to leak. This is why we're testing this for water leaks, because if it's not watertight, it's definitely not going to be airtight. And with this air movement through these holes, as the subwoofer moves back and forth, it's going to be pushing air in and out. The movement of air is sound. So this is going to be creating certain frequencies as the air moves at certain speeds, creating what sometimes sounds like a vibration or whatever. It's basically the subwoofer breathing and pushing out air that is just not going to sound right. It creates weird rattles, vibrations, and it sounds like the actual sub box is vibrating and rattling. So with these two things in mind, we're going to remake this. We are going to have to use fiberglass to get that extra volume, because the ply is going to take up more volume to give the same strength. With that fiberglass sheeting in there, and the fiberglass will be able to get the same strength but with a little bit less thickness and give us a bit more volume in general. So I've gone ahead and gone a bit crazy with something called duct tape, and completely filled this area so to give us a general mould of what we're going to be working with. But we'll get some resin and fiberglass around the back, give us a general mould, then we'll get that out and then we can start from there. But yeah, let's get to it. Right, as you can see, we've finished our fiberglass mould. I've only done a thin layer of mesh around the entire thing. I've missed a couple of spots, but that's not necessarily a problem because I wanted to keep it a bit more flexible and thin because we're going to be changing it a lot. I just wanted to get the general area that we can work to and then build from there. This is giving us the final dimensions that we can work with. I've measured this out, mind taking away things like extra filler that I'm going to be adding, so 10% for any front face that we're going to be adding, things like that, volume of the sub, all of that sort of stuff, and calculated that we're roughly working with a max volume of about 32 litres, which is a huge difference from what they originally had in here. So this is a great start to work with. So we've really got some room for error. We can shave off a lot of the sides, make it a lot more usable. We can add a lot more bulk to those places where we need to reinforce for places like bolts and stuff like that to attach it to the car, give it some proper rigidity, and we can add some real thickness to the sides so that we're going to really give it some base transfer, not be having the box wobbling around or splitting or getting breaches, and we can really make sure this thing's sealed and transferring that base nicely through the car and giving this sub what it deserves. We're going to pull this out, get it into the woodroom and start filling, bulking it up, and potentially looking at mounting, getting some bolt holes in, and then get a face on it, and yeah, going from there. Right, so we're going to pause on the back there with the sub build and the floor build. On the front here though, we can move on to the A-pillars and the display in the centre. As regards to the A-pillars, we have these originally. These are a very large mass of filler and partly MDF and stuff like that. The finish of the material isn't too great. It's not stuck quite right and it's peeling up on the edges, as you can see, and it comes off far too easily. So there's a couple of issues to deal with, and of course, the speaker grill is not quite fitting. In regards to the weight, it is 1.5 kilos these A-pillars now weigh, which in comparison to the original ones of 200 grams, that is a lot of weight to add to these A-pillars, hence why they were potentially falling out. They're only held in with two little clips, and these are just not strong enough to hold that sort of weight in that position. So we're going to be looking at reducing that weight. We're also going to be looking at mounting these a little bit better, because as you can see, they just fall out. We've got some replacement grills for the mids, and the way we're going to be mounting these a little bit better is we've printed off these adaptions for them. These are a lighter weight, still have that very heavy strength, and these already fit the grills and speakers in with the Milano already pushed in there and with material already pushed in there, so that we know that we're going to be able to fit our grills and everything in there straight from stock. So we can get these mounted in a way that points straight to the driver as he wants it all pointed towards him. He's not worried about necessarily the looks, he's more worried about the actual audio that's getting to him. So we're going to be pointing all the speakers directly to him so he gets the best sound quality possible. With that sort of sorted, we can move on to stripping them, as I've already done. And as you can see, they haven't quite prepped the material right. It still had all of the original material on. You can still see it peeling up here. This is going to have negative effects on the actual filler and everything sticking to the A-pillar. It was quite easy to pull all this off. I just sort of bent the A-pillar, gave it a smack with a hammer, cracked it up a bit, and it all just came off. They have added these holes, which is good. It allows the filler to actually mould it through the material and grip on the other side. So we're going to be prepping this material, taking all this off, burning all the original sort of material off, roughing up the material that's underneath so that our fiberglass and all of our filler can stick to it properly. But first of all, we're going to get these in, get the other ones stripped, and then look at mounting the actual adapters in a position where we can build from there. In regards to the centerpiece though, I've already stripped that off. I've already positioned this in a way where this was a lot flatter and sort of in line with the actual panel. I've taken that to a lot steeper angle, so it's going to be a lot more visible to the driver and you can actually see the screen. But we'll move into the woodroom, get all these stripped off, get them ready, get them prepped, and then we can start getting them sorted, get them in the car, and see how it looks. Right, so we're getting to the point of finish with this sub box. As you can see, I've done quite a lot of work on it. I've also just created some small, nice little squaring pieces to get this nice and even. There's a couple more things to do with it though. We've got to actually create a bolt hole, a couple on the bottom that will go straight into the metalwork below, and then there's also a nice little mounting location at the back that we can sort of jump into. We'll have to put a quick riv nut in there so that we can put our bolt through, but there's a nice little location that I've already formed the actual fiberglass to, so it will sit nicely on that. But before we create any holes in this box that we've nicely sealed, we need to make sure that it's going to stay sealed. For this one, we're going to be using just a body filler and resin. This is going to water down that body filler so it flows a lot easier. This is going to allow it to flow into all those gaps, flow into all the edges where we haven't quite filled. This is going to create an even sort of coating and an even thickness to the entire box and fill in any of those air holes that we still might be left with. I've already tested that we don't have any water leaks or anything. This is a nice, quick and easy way just to check that we don't have any sort of major air leaks, but this method will just ensure that we don't have any air leaking out of this box. But yeah, I'll get to it, get this filled, and then we can move on to some other stuff. Right, we're at a point where most of our fabrication is now complete. We've done the subwoofer in the back, that is mostly complete and nice and neat. There's just a couple of more final little bits, but that is painted and nice and in the corner. We just need to wrap it and do a couple of final like bolting down, bits like that. The A-pillars are also most of the way there. There's just a final bit of sanding and filling just to smooth them off, then a nice wrapping on them, same as the center display piece. So with most of our fabrication done, it's now onto the floor in the back. As you can see, I've already made the floor. I've started laying out where our amplifiers are. This is a very important fact. A lot of people just chuck them in anywhere, lay them in, and then run their wires afterwards. We need to worry about where our wires are actually going to be running, because this can cause a lot of interference and buzzing and things like that, which is important to avoid, because power wires can cause buzz if they're laid next to all of those feed wires. So as you can see, I've laid our amplifiers on the outside so that our feeds can come. We're going to be having our outputs at the top here. Those will go straight out and to the front. And then we've also got a power on the top here as well. This isn't as important to avoid our outputs as the input side. This doesn't create as much of a buzz. So we've got our power kept along the top here as well. So we've got our distribution block at the top. We'll have our power coming in from the side, straight from the front. Just come straight to our distribution block at the top, and then go to our two amplifiers, keeping everything nice and towards the top here. We've also got a beacon, which will avoid the power wires, but it's in a nice space at the top of here as well. We've also got our extra amplifier in here now as well. I've added a little bit of extra room towards the back, hence why I've remade the floor, just to get a bit of extra space. There was nothing wrong with the previous build, it's just it was looking a bit tired and we just didn't have enough space in there to fit our stuff. So with adding this extra space, we've been able to add this 4-channel in here nicely. There's a nice amount of space around the amplifiers. It's going to be able to breathe nicely when we get some extra fans in there as well to get the air moving through. Our virtuoso at the front is keeping all of our outputs nice and down low. So all of our outputs will be going straight from here, straight into our amplifiers at the bottom. It's going to keep them nice and far away from any power. We're also going to have a power coming in down here. So it means we're keeping all the outputs and inputs from our virtuoso to our processor, to our amplifiers, nice and far away from any power inputs. But with this sort of laid out, I can now move on to actually building up our box, creating a nice area for this, and then we can move on to potentially lining it, getting in some ventilation, a couple of fans towards the front. Apart from that, we'll keep the air moving, keep it all nice and separated, and hopefully have this sound system neat. As you can see, we've been moving along with the project. I've been entitled help from a couple of the guys from the workshop, as I've got places to be this weekend. Getting married, so, you know. But we're moving along with it. We've got the subwoofer in, as you've seen, and we've started wrapping everything, and we've completely wrapped the floor, completely remade the floor actually. There's a couple more things to do. As we've now got everything in, we just need to do a couple of final checks, make sure we go over the system, make sure everything's sat nicely, working correctly, and then we can hand it off to Ardal to just do that final tune, as I'm going to have to run out. I'll leave you guys to it, and I'll leave these guys to it. I'll see you next time.
Starting off then from these front doors, but actually before we start on that, let's actually go through what was in the car. So before, there was a front end, a sub, all very poorly fitted, but it was there, and we had 2 amplifiers in the system with a processor. We've added 1 additional amplifier and added in rear set, it's just a 2-way, just for rear fill, but it makes a huge difference. So inside the bottom of the door there is a Hertzmüller Legend mid-bass driver that sits into that location, OEM location, but the rest is then all changed. A-pillars, these are now fitted correctly, custom built, molded exactly how we want them, and exactly how our client wanted them as well. We've got the Hertzmüller Legend set, the tweeter and mid-range. These are actually fully on axis to the driver listening position. Obviously the vehicle, as you saw in today's video, wasn't fully sound deadened. So what we've done is fully sound deaden the rest of the vehicle. We've added 70 sheets of skins layer into this, the 3mm layer that we've used. Make the car a lot more solid, reduce road noise, and also build a better system for this car. System that we've got OEM location in the rear, just for a little bit of rear feel, but it does make a huge difference. But now, this is where a hell of a lot of the work has gone into to get, in essence, redoing the system. Obviously, this whole panel area, when you've got a sub in a system, you're moving more air. None of this was sound deadened. You got things like this torch here wasn't plugged back in. It is now connected back in. What we've had to do in this rear section here is quite a lot of work. We've had to rebuild the sub, as you saw JP did earlier. in today's video, and then we've remounted that and actually bolted that in. It gives such more depth to the system. Then we've actually had to remake the floor because obviously we're adding more products in. Client was happy with kind of the design and how it was sat in there before, but just wanted it kind of redone, obviously with the additional parts in here. Plus we're using a lot more cable when adding that in as well. What we've also done is added 4 fans into the system, circulating that air. There was never an issue hiding these amplifiers under that floor with that, but what we wanted to do with this is save our client any aggro with overheating. So we've added in those fans into the system. You've got some incredible gear here, and it looks really neat and tidy now with all those cables actually positioned where they need to be. Obviously, excuse the one cable that you got dangling, that is the tuning cable. We'll be removing that, and then everything will look really neat. You might be thinking, well, where's my boot? And that's exactly what we've done. We've made a boot floor that sits onto the factory lip, cover it all, and you won't see a thing. So retaining space, we've built the custom enclosure with the Hertz sub on the side. It just is how it should have been done from day one. But it's actually been probably a little bit more work on this install to get this to where it needed to be, rather than just starting from scratch, because we had to redo and work out what on earth had gone on before, as you've seen in today's video. But overall, we are all done, guys, with the car. Let's move on, and actually you guys are now going to be able to listen to the system with me, and of course you guys are going to be able to experience that for yourselves. But there is nothing like listening to systems in person. Always feel free, if you're passing the area, come by, see us, view our facility, listen to a couple of cars, and we've got some absolutely awesome projects on the way for our channel. So stay tuned, guys, but let's jump into the listening section. This is the moment you guys have all been waiting for, the final result. You guys are going to be able to listen to the system. But remember, guys, this is never going to do it justice listening to whatever you're listening it on, even if it's a proper home hi-fi system or a decent car audio system. It is never ever going to do it justice listening to this level of system with everything on axis ready and waiting for this driver position. It's going to sound, it does. We've done the tuning. It sounds absolutely incredible. I've just sat with a client. He's come obviously from Ireland again to come pick up the car, and it's an absolute honor that people do travel this kind of distance. But he sat in the car. I've not even finished final tuning yet, but he sat in the car and was absolutely in awe of the system. So let's have a listen. I mean, that's like a quarter volume, guys. I'm not even going to run it probably any higher than that, but that's so nice. To the sky and scream out loud. This is my life. Sounds so good in here. This is what I stand for. Now is the time to let it really clear. Now those additional those rears is kind of surrounding me. The other, obviously, the thing is, what we've done is, obviously the controller was mounted in that same location, but you couldn't actually see it because of the angle it was. Now you can actually see it. We've remolded this in the same location, but just so you can actually use it and see it. And the clarity now. I used to dream about money, about a big house, but all I want is you. Your touch of fire when you love me, desirable, attainable, yeah, all I want is you. We are all the same, fame, attention, confirmation. Why do we care? What is it worth? Before, the level of gear just didn't sound like it was even in the car, really. It felt like it was missing so much, and you've seen JP throughout today's video go through so many elements of the system where we found flaws in the system, where we found actually some good bits as well. So it wasn't all bad. There were some good bits in this car, and it was one of those things that it was just not fully correct. And this is where, guys, I talk about it quite a lot in other videos. This is a perfect example. Unfortunately, our client has had to pretty much pay twice for the work, but it's one of those things that you've got to choose your installer very carefully, and that's why this client's traveled all the way from Ireland to us to have the work carried out, because it's very, it's one of those things, you see a lot online, you see a lot of content putting out by a lot of companies, you see a lot from ourselves. Content is absolutely fantastic, but you've also got to understand the people behind the scenes. So for example, the work on this vehicle. So because this car had a system in it already, there was actually one very strange element of the system that we don't know till final testing. So yesterday we actually found that there's an optical module that was based underneath this seat. That wasn't actually, it was installed and the client had paid for that module, but it wasn't actually using optical, it was using an RCA converter and then a converter again to drop it into the amplifiers. Issues like that, we were under the assumption that that was done for a specific reason, so we didn't find that was actually the case. We found that it was probably just because of lack of resources, that potentially didn't have a long enough optical cable, and anyway we've had to rewire that. Issues like that caused a little bit of a delay in terms of where we wanted to be when finishing this particular vehicle. We've all got it ready for our client to get on the ferry back, to get it all collected, and he'll be absolutely fine with when we're finished up like we are now. But it's one of those things, there was a little bit of a delay. Me and the team stayed late last night, and then also I was in at 5:30 this morning setting up the system, getting it ready for our client. And that is the difference between people that really care, and I really do. This client has traveled many miles all the way from Ireland to ourselves. This car has to be right, it has to be perfect. It's going to go back, and it's going to be a pain in the arse if he ever has to come back, so I don't want that for him. I want to make it as perfect as I possibly can do, and that is why our team stayed late, came in early to get this car to where we are right now. But I'm so proud of our team, the final results. JP's done an absolute mega job, and now he is actually, as of this weekend, about to be a married man as well. So congratulations again to JP on his new marriage, and also thank you once again to our client, who has done an incredible couple of journeys, one for the consultation and then for dropping off the car and now collecting the car. And I'm sure he is going to be absolutely over the moon with the work that our team has all put together to get this car ready to go for our client. So thank you once again for watching, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. You've seen a very different style of video today and seen a lot more of an in-depth dive of some of the problems you can actually face when having an install done, and that is why you got to choose the Cambridge Cardio way. I'll see you on the next one.